Hello, and welcome to Ethical Corporation's webinar on circular economy and supply chains. Over the next 45 minutes, we'll be discussing the extent to which three top brands, Fairphone, GSK and Bam UK, are developing effective strategies and programs to enable circular economy in their global value chains. My name is Elena Yumasheva, and today I will be a moderator of this discussion. So with us today we have Matt Wilson, who is the head of global environmental sustainability at science-led global healthcare company GSK. Matt's role is to deliver the targets to reduce GSK's environmental impact. This covers the sourcing of raw materials and GSK's own labs and factories to the use and disposal of products by patients and consumers. In other words, the entire value chain. Second panelist today is Nitesh Magdani, who is Director of Sustainability at Bam UK. Nitesh has a passion for designing out waste using natural materials and materials with low embedded impact. Today, Nitesh is responsible for developing Bam's sustainability expertise in every aspect of designing, constructing, managing, and maintaining buildings. His focus includes embedding sustainable design with building information modeling, ensuring that we consider the life cycle impacts of the materials that they design, construct, and use within the buildings. And our last speaker is lovely Bibi Blake-Mollin. She looks after innovation and impact development at Fairphone. Fairphone is a social enterprise with the aim to develop a smartphone designed and produced with minimal harm to people and planet. She has a background in international relations and investigative journalism. Fairphone doesn't take no for an answer, challenges the status quo and thereby raises the bar for themselves and others to look for alternatives. So that's our lovely panel today. Thank you all for joining us. So to give you an understanding of today's structure, there are no slides. It's a pure discussion. The webinar will be focused discussion with the speakers, trying to bring out as much of their expertise and knowledge from the backgrounds and the work they've done. Each speaker will be focusing on different areas of management. So we'll be moving from one speaker to another. This means if you have any questions coming up whilst one is presenting, please answer them in the chat box. You can also tweet them by using hashtag SSC15. We will also have polling questions in the webinar, which we'll put to you, the audience, and our speakers will then bring in their perspectives and responses to the questions. Please note, your answers will be strictly confidential, so please do share your views. The second half will involve a Q&A with the audience, where the audience can ask questions directly to the speakers once again. So before we begin, I would like to emphasize it's an interactive discussion. On the right-hand side, you will see a box where you can post your questions. You can also post questions via Twitter, as I mentioned earlier, using the hashtag SSC15. So please do get involved. We'll now begin the webinar and discussion. And to start the conversation and just to understand where we are, we'll start with a simple question, which you will see on your screens now. So the question says, have you started or are you implementing the concept of circular economy in your supply chains yet? There are two answers. It's either yes or no. So please choose one of the options, and we'll be able to understand how far our audience have moved with implementing circular economy in supply chains. So I'm going to give you 5 more seconds. So it's 4, 3, 2, 1, and we're going to wrap up. So the answers we have, 30% are actually using and already implementing circular economy concept in their supply chains, and 70% said no. I have to say it's actually quite impressive, because when I was putting this question some time ago, I didn't expect that 30% of the audience would confidently say yes. So well done on you. And there is a second question which we need to have now. So the question you would see on your screen again. So what are the main challenges of implementing the concept of circular economy? Lack of internal buy-in, board and colleagues, lack of external buy-in, suppliers and other stakeholders, vagueness of the concept, or its inability to translate it to the business context, and the final one, there is no business case for it. Please do get involved, everyone, even those who said no, because this question is applicable for all our audience. So again, 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1, and that's it. Interesting results. So we have 33%, that's the biggest share of respondents who said they're unable to translate the circular economy concept to the business context. Second answer is 27% vagueness of the concept. Then we have 15 and 14%, there is no business case for it, and lack of external buy-in. And the least popular one is lack of internal buy-in, which is actually quite reassuring. That means there is support for it internally. Right, interesting. Thank you very much, everyone, for participating in this opinion poll. So, dear speakers, over to you. I would love to hear your thoughts, first of all, on what was the main challenge for implementing the concept of circular economy in your companies, and how did you manage to overcome these? And I would also like to ask you to give a quick introduction to your company so the listeners have a full understanding of it. So, Matt, shall we start with you?
Thanks, Alina. Hi, everyone. My name is Matt Wilson. I'm the Head of Environmental Sustainability for GlaxoSmithKline. If you don't know who GlaxoSmithKline are, we're a global healthcare company. We have 110,000 employees, there or thereabouts, 100 manufacturing sites, and I think we're present in about 140 countries globally. We're split into 3 divisions: pharmaceutical, vaccines, and fast-moving consumer healthcare. We're a science-led organisation, and running right through all 3 divisions is a focus on innovation and access to medicines. And hopefully you'll have seen some news from us recently around the first cure, or the first vaccine, I should say, for malaria, and also focusing on vaccines for treating and preventing Ebola. And I think what I'd like to talk about from a circular economy perspective is that for a pharmaceutical company, a vaccines company, a fast-moving consumer healthcare company, the #1 focus for us is the patient at the end of the supply chain, and we focus on making sure we get high-quality medicines at the right price to people at the right time. So going back and asking the organisation to look at what, quite frankly, are materials we discard along that journey, and trying to get some focus on that has been extremely challenging. Challenging for a number of reasons. That is not the focus. It's often complicated. The materials are varied in terms of hazardous and non-hazardous. With that geographic footprint, legislation is different in all of those countries. Recycling infrastructure is different across the globe as well. So very, very complicated. And to bring it back to how do you get started, or how do we get started? Very simply, focusing on the waste hierarchy and looking at it in a pragmatic way and setting some pragmatic targets. And the first pragmatic target I set for the organisation was to eliminate waste to landfill. And you might think, well, this isn't particularly, groundbreaking or challenging, but I did it because it sends a very important signal to the organisation. It sends a signal that we can't consume resource and just discard it to a hole in the ground with no further thought for it. All these materials have other uses. The second thing we did was then set some targets to drive the remaining material, or the material that we're not reducing or eliminating, up the hierarchy. And there, for me, it was important to get some lighthouse projects. And one of those lighthouse projects is called Complete Cycle, and that is collecting used medicines from pharmacies, and I'll talk a bit about that later on. But we have lots of examples now where we've been able to reuse, recycle, repurpose material that we no longer want. And then coupled with that, we have a focus, as I said, on innovation. And that innovation focus has helped us launch initiatives such as green chemistry, so substituting the materials we use for much more benign materials. And then another initiative called Advanced Manufacturing Technologies, where we're radically changing the way we manufacture our products using enzymes or flow chemistry. And these dramatically reduce the waste in the first place. So through a combination of focusing on how we make our products, the materials we use to make our products, and then thinking cleverly about how do we repurpose those materials, we're really starting to embrace the circular economy in GSK.
Okay, excellent. So just to confirm, it wasn't the case for you. It wasn't the case for you to make a business case internally. So once you suggested, for example, to move from landfill at all, so did you feel that it was well received by the senior management, and that was sort of they were proactive and positive towards this?
We did develop a business case, and being quite frank with that business case, some of the opportunities were a financial saving or an improvement in security of supply. Others have been a cost to the business, but the business has embraced it because it's the right thing to do.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much, Matt. Nitesh, what are your thoughts on the results? And please tell us more about difficulties BAM had to go through in translating the notion of circular economy.
Okay, thanks, Alina. Okay, so I'm Nitesh Magdani from BAM Construct UK. So we're part of the Royal BAM Group, which is an international construction services company. We focus on design, construction, and FM. So as part of a Dutch-owned construction company, we're fortunate to have experience with the circular economy starting in the Netherlands with a circular building, and that was completed in 2013. So having seen the benefits of this solution in the Netherlands, so we then took the decision to join the Ellen MacArthur Foundation to scale up circular economy to different parts of the business. So in the UK, we're very active not only with the foundation, but also engaging with the value chain to understand the barriers and opportunities and developing performance contracts for some of our clients as well. So realistically, unlike in the Netherlands, our government hasn't announced that we're going to be the first circular economy hotspot in the world, that is the UK, and therefore our supply chain are not yet set up to understand the two main opportunities for their business. The first one being the fact that manufacturers retain the value of their assets, and secondly, the ability to develop long-term relationships with end users, both as opposed to many who operate their business models focused on point of sale. So having said that, as mentioned earlier, there's a lot of interest in the industry to try and understand how companies can innovate to try and become one of the first movers in the UK as well.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much, Nitesh. So shall we move to Bibi? So you obviously represent a unique company, a recent startup, Fairphone, that is working hard to put circular economic thinking in practice and apply it to the smartphone industry. So you obviously have a slightly different perspective from traditional multinational corporation. So would you share your thoughts on the matter?
Yes, of course. Thanks, Alina, and hi, everyone. The reason why the concept of circular economy appeals so much to Fairphone is that it requires you to approach things from a holistic point of view. Fairphone is a social enterprise, and we use the production of a smartphone to innovate and increase the social and environmental performance of both the product and the supply chain that surrounds it. For us, we have defined 4 action areas in which we want to make step-by-step improvements, which are mining, design, manufacturing, and lifecycle management. Most obviously, a circular economy is, of course, about lifecycle management, about closing loops. And in that area, we particularly want to raise awareness and pioneer to prevent electronic waste, or e-waste. If you look at last year, over 40 million tons of e-waste was generated worldwide last year alone, and a big portion of it ended up being illegally dismantled in areas that don't have proper recycling facilities. For example, in Ghana, in West Africa, you see many people burning old electronics and cables to get the metals and minerals out again, like copper and aluminium. And although the reuse of materials is good, these burning practices cause extreme environmental damage and health problems. Therefore, when we launched our first Fairphone in 2013, we allocated funding to start collaborating with local and international partners and set up a take-back program in Ghana to collect completely damaged phones that would otherwise potentially end up being poorly dismantled, and brought them to Europe for safe recycling. In addition, and a bit similarly, we facilitated all consumers that bought a Fairphone 1 to hand in any old phone that they would still have in their homes and in their drawers, and either resell them or recycle them. And we didn't manage yet to break even with this project, but we do see from our perspective definitely a business case in the take-back and recycling of phones in the longer run. But while these take-back projects allow us to collect and recycle over 3 tons of e-waste from Ghana and help it to get the issue across in many media outlets, it is in this way an offset of the weight that we put on the market ourselves by bringing new phones on it as well. A bit like flying an airplane and pay a fee to plant a tree somewhere. So much more important and innovative, I think, in what we do is to take a circular approach in the design of our actual product and production processes, and to try and turn that into a business case. For example, our second phone that will come out later this year, the Fairphone 2, it has been designed with a strong focus on do-it-yourself repair to give consumers the ability to take responsibility in keeping their phones longer. The product and the infrastructure around it has been designed in such a way that everyone can order spare parts themselves on our website, and with a few simple steps replace components themselves, and targeting especially those elements that tend to break often and are reason for people to otherwise replace their whole phone completely. Think about the touchscreen, for example. I bet many people that listen now actually have experienced the correct touchscreen of their smartphones before. But with the Fairphone 2, not only did we improve the screen protection, but we designed it in such a way that only with 2 clips you can slide off the screen and click on a new one. And the old screen can be sent in to us for either reuse and recycling. And to me, that is an example of circular economic thinking on a much more micro level, but which in turn all add up to motivate a more systematic change.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Bibi. May I just use to encourage everyone to tweet and ask more questions. So Twitter hashtag is SSC15. It's also on your screen on the right top corner. And you can also enter your questions to the chat box using the software. We do have a few questions here. They're very specific. So, okay, there is one question for Nitesh. We're going to address it later on because this is part of our conversation as well. There is one for Matt, which I think would be interesting and is in line with what Matt said. So the question is, the person, Martin, is actually messaging us saying that he really likes the pragmatic use of waste hierarchy. But how do you move people to look at the materials being used in the first place? So that's a question for Matt. Matt, did you get the question, or shall I repeat it?
I did. So I think it was how do we motivate people to look at the materials in the first place?
Yeah.
So, and I think for GSK, the answer to that question is we have an overarching environmental sustainability strategy where we're focusing on our value chain, and we broadly focus on 3 buckets: overall carbon footprint, water impact, and resource use or waste. So within the context of that overall strategy, we focus on life cycle assessment, life cycle inventory, and understanding where the opportunities are to improve our focus on those materials, and we develop business cases accordingly to demonstrate the benefit both to GSK and the environment.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much, Matt. I'm concerned with the time, so shall we move to the next section? So now we're going to talk about supply engagement specifically. Now we gained a basic understanding of the difficulties in the space and the ways they could be tackled. So supply chain issues specifically is on our agenda now. So how to bring circularity down your supply chain, engage your suppliers in innovative work you're doing to create a bigger impact. I would like to invite Nitesh first to comment on the subject. Obviously, finding the partners from your industry or beyond is a challenge, but without partners and supporters, companies cannot get that far. I know that BAM is a member of Supply Chain Sustainability School initiative, which actually represents a very good and long-standing industry initiative that helps to drive circular economy agenda forward. So would you tell us a bit more as well about how this industry helps you to get the supply buy-in and just your sort of professional experiences on the subject?
Sure. So we joined this supply chain school, supply chain sustainability school, because we acknowledged that the school were set up to be able to upskill the value chain around sustainability issues, which we, like many construction companies in the industry, we're regularly being asked for or being asked to respond to. And with clients taking a longer-term view with their developments generally, the circular economy is a good opportunity for us to present solutions to them to offer added reassurance to our clients with regards to long-term performance, as well as delivering reductions in waste, obviously. So from our experience of the UK market and our conversations with suppliers to date, we recognise the value of education, which is why we're supporting the school to put together face-to-face workshops to get to grips with the circular economy. The first workshop will be in October, which will be a forum of 50 to 100 members or companies, and then we'll have face-to-face workshops afterwards over the coming 5 or 6 months. So it's a substantial effort that the school are actually going to promote the circular economy, because we can see the step change that's required. And also, I just wanted to mention another piece of work we're doing. We're also working with the Royal Society of Arts and their Great Recovery project, which has been going for about 3 years now. And essentially, they devised an approach called the tear-down, design-up approach. And essentially, it's reviewing materials that are coming out of the building and the lack of information that leads us to waste in the first place, and actually, getting around the table with, designers, contractors, subcontractors, supply chain, manufacturers, and also the waste experts to actually start looking for solutions to design for circularity or designing for repurposing, reuse, as opposed to just, design for a one-use product.
Okay, excellent. Next panelist, Matt, it would be interesting to learn more about GSK's approaches on engaging suppliers in an innovative work that you're doing. Obviously, it's been partly covered. I think one of the interesting areas here would be perhaps if you could tell us more about how working with your suppliers is adding to the circular economy culture.
Sure, thanks, Alina. I suppose just very briefly, I'd like to touch on an overarching initiative that GSK runs with its suppliers, and that's called the GSK Supplier Exchange. This is an online environment. We partner with a company called 2 Degrees. We have 250 of our largest suppliers taking part, just under 400 members, and we use this portal to engage our suppliers in a whole host of issues focusing on environmental sustainability. As I mentioned, we have a value chain approach, so we talk about carbon, water and resource efficiency in this space, and we use this to share best practice and accelerate implementation of ideas, so we don't all have to keep learning how to do the same thing over and over again. We can learn from each other. And it's been really successful. I think in the first 6 months, we identified something of the order of 70,000 tonnes worth of CO2 reduction. We had 150 different discussions focusing across those 3 subjects. So that's been really quite successful, and I see that going from strength to strength. But the example I wanted to focus on here was something that I'm incredibly proud of ourselves, and that links our suppliers and our customers in the circular economy, and that's called Complete the Cycle. So GSK's environmental footprint or carbon footprint is disproportionately influenced by one class of products, metered-dose inhalers, which are used to treat asthma. They have a propellant in them, 1,3,4-A, which has a high global warming potential and contributes about a third of the overall footprint. So we recognised to help GSK reduce its environmental impact, we needed to do something here. So working with our gas supplier, our logistic or the pharmacy logistics provider, and our recyclers, we designed a program called Complete the Cycle, where we now collect back all of the used inhalers, or as many inhalers as we can, in store from pharmacies. We bring those back to the waste handlers. The inhalers are disassembled. The gas, the aluminium, and the plastic then goes off for recycling. And this has been a fantastic flagship project for us. It's now running in 4 countries. In the UK, we've just collected 500,000 inhalers back. So a great result again. And it has, it's been a journey over a number of years. It still doesn't break even when you look at it in a straightforward P&L. However, when you start to consider the broader benefits, it becomes very attractive. Additional work that's spun out from this is in collecting those inhalers back, we've been able to understand how well patients are using them. So now working with NHS Grampian, they're running a campaign called Don't Waste a Breath, where they're advising patients on how better to use their inhalers, how better to get their symptoms under control, and they're able to feed that back directly. So that for me is a fantastic example of suppliers and customers working together to initiate a circular economy.
Yes, that's indeed a very interesting and active sort of innovative example of how it's being implemented. I have actually one question for you. You obviously talk a lot about the consumer engagement and customer engagement, which is clear given that the GSK is a very patient-centric company. I wonder how well these kind of initiatives are being received by your suppliers. You did mention that you work with a consultancy which is advising you on supply engagement. But when it comes to actually making the case for them, how open are they, and how hard or easy for you to actually get the buy-in?
Well, I think, you know, GSK has to show leadership. I think if we look uncertain, then it's more difficult for our suppliers to engage with us. If we generate a clear business case, then it's easy for our suppliers to engage with us on this. And we asked some simple questions through our exchange. We started as a pilot and we asked them, did they find value in it? And I think their responses were something like 76% of the members of the exchange were finding value that they were able to apply to their own organisations. And when we asked, should this continue, 96% of all members said yes.
Wow, that's impressive. That's a very high rate. Well, thank you very much for your insights. So, Bibi, again, keeping you to the end. I would imagine compared to big multinational corporations, Fairphone did not have that purchasing power. It could leverage the impact the way suppliers work. But again, this is such a unique company. It's a social enterprise. So please tell us about your approaches from engaging suppliers from the day one.
Yes, Alina, you're definitely right. With Fairphone 1, it was indeed quite difficult to convince manufacturers to even produce product with us, let alone spend any additional time on social and environmental challenges that they may have been encountering. Our volume was very low compared to traditional orders, 25,000 in the first year and 35,000 in the second year. And we had no proof of concept, never produced a phone before, and had a business proposition on the basis of crowdfunding, meaning that the consumers were to pay €325 for the price of the phone to give us the financial support and kickstart production. And for many of the manufacturers that we spoken to at that time, it was too much of a hassle and a risk. But nevertheless, we managed to get on board partners, sell out all the phones before mass production started, and deliver them to all the customers in Europe. And basically what we did, and I think that's basically a proposition that we're still using today, is that we're willing to invest in a long-term relationship, and that their success is our success and vice versa. And in practice, this means that one thing, we are creating things together and totally acknowledging that each of us should do what we do best, while on the other side being receptive and transparent to learn from one another. And we always try and customize our approach to the specifics of a particular supplier and not burden them with blueprints that seem perfect from an office in Amsterdam, but doesn't really fit the reality of most of our partners. Because of that, we're not a fan of audits in which you send someone to visit the facility and check boxes to leave not much but a paper trail. We try to identify suppliers that are receptive to perform longer-term assessment programs, in which we basically use the same international standards from the ILO and the ETI and so on as a starting point, but the difference is that we use these standards to look for opportunities on where we would be able to make a real impact in the operations of that particular facility. In other words, we try not to police the suppliers, but to find a common ground and to use these standards for activities that we could develop together and that would be a valuable investment for both sides. And now with Fairphone 2, we have a bit more proof of concept due to the success of Fairphone 1. And even though we have not started mass production, we already see the sort of increase in enthusiasm with suppliers if they see the attention that it gets in the world nowadays and in the media. And they start to see Fairphone a bit as a window of opportunity to become an early adopter themselves for more responsible ways of operating their businesses.
That's really interesting. I actually have one question. So do you mean that you don't do audits in principle, or is it just not the major form to make sure that your suppliers meet certain criteria?
It depends a bit on the definition that you give. In my view, a traditional audit is basically a checklist that you perform yourself or together with a third-party audit company to go around and check for standards, whether they're there or not there. And sometimes the companies get a bit of an advice or direction on how to correct certain findings, but with an assessment, it's much more assessing the baseline situation of a facility and use that and the things we see as an opportunity to provide training, to organize workshops together, to link the suppliers to other suppliers that are a best practice on that certain aspect. So we sort of really use the information as a way to work together on finding opportunities to increase social and environmental performance, rather than saying, okay, you don't have this in place, we don't work with you, because that usually increases also or incentivizes suppliers to be not transparent at all, which is, I think, a real waste for a business relationship.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much for your insights. So we have a few questions. I promised one question for you, Nitesh. As I said, it would be more appropriate for this section. So the question is actually around internal buy-in. Martin is asking, he's interested to hear the drive of long-term relationships, but as a supplier to the construction sector, he's found that the sector's procurement teams are almost always default to short-term, lowest-cost solutions. How do you change this? Do you have any examples of this kind of work?
Yeah, thanks, Martin. I suppose it is difficult, I must admit, but in the Netherlands, I suppose what we've shown through a live working example of a circular building, where the client actually didn't have the requirement for, the briefing wasn't to develop a circular building, but it was to develop a building for 15 to 20 years. Now, our response as the construction partner, together with our designers, was actually, as part of a design and build competition, was actually looking at proposing a circular solution. So we put in touch with the end user, which was the municipality of Brummen, so it's a town hall building. We put in touch with them, or we put in place contracts between themselves and suppliers and manufacturers, which otherwise, would be very different, meaning that the contracts put in place were performance-based contracts, and it was to deliver a service. So the lighting performance was kept at whatever lux levels were written in the development brief, and they're actually maintained over that period of time. And as we all know, in the construction industry and in most industries, actually, generally speaking, products will deteriorate over time. So if you put a contract in place that sort of puts the onus of responsibility with manufacturers and suppliers for that duration, it means that they're having to think upfront about the choices that they're making in terms of manufacturing a product that's going to withstand so many lumens, or so many trafficked areas or whatever. So you're actually asking for that product to last longer than its standard guarantee or warranty you would normally get. So that's probably the main example where we've actually shown a benefit to a client for a longer period. And actually, by doing that, we demonstrated that there was no additional costs either. And that's one of the things that often, that scenario that you put forward where capital costs are too high or expensive to allow upfront investment. This is actually a case where where we can actually persuade clients to take that longer term view. We can actually show them that based on the fact that you don't need to maintain, replace, and upgrade your fittings or your fixtures in a building, it can actually be cost neutral, if not cheaper.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Nitesh. The last but not least, earlier in our opinion poll, some answered that circular economy is a very vague concept, which I would actually agree with to a certain extent. It's a challenge in itself to actually translate it and adapt to your business or industry context. There aren't any set standards on how it should be. Despite this, we do have companies such as GSK, Fairphone, and BAM with us today who are actually working hard and started rolling out circular economy programs on a corporate level. I therefore would like to delve into an even more difficult space, measurement of impacts. So my question to the panelists is, how do you measure the outcome of your efforts in implementing the concept of circular economy in your supply chains? Perhaps you could refer to particular programs, as Matt was mentioning earlier, the inhalers recycling program, or any other ways you do it. Bibi, shall we start with you?
Yes, sure. Yes, sure. Thanks, Lina. I think what is important as impact measurement and data collection can be a very time-consuming activity. I think for each company and for each organization out there, it's crucial to pick indicators that make sense for you and your specific situation and ambition. For Fairphone, transparency and accountability is a very crucial part of the success of our campaign. And by calling ourselves Fairphone, we put ourselves up also for a lot of scrutiny, especially if we explain openly that we're definitely far away from being 100% fair on all the issues that we want to address. At the same time, with a total of 40 people currently in the Fairphone office, it's not manageable to assess all matters throughout our whole supply chain. If you think that for one electronic device, it means hundreds of individual suppliers, which each of them having again their own web of sub-suppliers, who have again their sub-suppliers, and so on and so on and so on. So what we did is we picked the trajectories that are most close to our hearts and in our opinion most urgent, where we could make the biggest steps to improvement, and subsequently define the key performance indicators and data collection mechanism that can give us some insights that we can use for further decision making and strategic direction. And we call this document, we call it our impact map, showing our theory of change and the key activities, outputs and outcomes that would support that. For example, if you take the area of mining and traceability, it's the area that we initially started Fairphone off with. But in the composition of a phone, you can find around 40 different metals and minerals, each wrapped, smelted, and mixed up at different stages in the supply chain. And while some may come from recycled sources, each of the metals in the end can potentially have been extracted in poor conditions somewhere around the world. And although it's a future ambition we have, we are not assessing at the moment all the minerals and metals used with our suppliers in our supply chain. But what we are doing at the time, for the time being, is that we measure the use of the four infamous conflict minerals: tin, tantalum, tungsten, and gold. And we collect data throughout our supply chain from suppliers that we know or we expect to be part of the routes that these minerals travel to our phone. And we really try and make them part of that journey in a positive way and really help them in the data collection processes. And in that trajectory, each request that we send out and the data that we get back is thoroughly assessed, because the more we know about the origin of these materials, the better, as that will allow us to target those sources that are currently struggling the most with social and environmental issues, which in turn would improve the performance of our supply chain and ultimately our phone. So for each of these areas that we target, we have identified certain impact indicators that for us are most indicative of a certain progress or can help facilitate further decision making in our company.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Bibi. Matt, what's your thoughts on the subject? And actually, there is one more question I'm going to add to it. Someone from the listeners asked about the percentage of inhalers being recycled. So if you could address that as well. Thank you.
The first question is a measurement. To be honest, I think it's extremely hard. And it's hard for a number of reasons. It's hard because of standards. It's hard because not all companies collect data in the same way. It's hard because there are so many suppliers to collect data from. So I can only talk about what we've done, and it is a journey. So based on we ask our suppliers representing 80% of our spend on materials to disclose carbon, water and waste data. Well, we've been doing that for 3 years now, and that represents just over £1 billion worth of spend. And what we're able to do there is monitor the resource intensity of those suppliers and aggregate that based on the number of packs or material, products that we're producing. So we've got a barometer for, are we getting better? Are we consuming less resources for the same output? What's much more challenging is understanding, well, where do all the discarded materials from our suppliers go. So we can ask some simple questions around recycling, waste to landfill, etc. But cooperation is varied because there's a whole load of barriers to get over, trust not being one of them. Why does GSK want to know this? And again, also you have to understand different countries approach different waste in certain ways, so infrastructure is not there, and so on and so forth. So essentially what we've done is we've set our ambition, we're engaging our suppliers, and we're asking our suppliers to tell us how well they're doing. And it's a journey. So I haven't really got an answer other than to say it's hard, and we're learning it. And then the second one, in terms of percentage of inhalers recycled, I think we're probably, being totally transparent, approaching 3 or 4% now for the UK, and our ambition is to get to 10.
Okay, is it a country-specific project, or is it around the world?
It's much harder to answer around the world, and we also, it's not just our own inhalers that we collect anyone's inhalers back. So then I don't know how many inhalers are produced globally by all the different companies. I just know what we do, and therefore what our target is for our own inhalers back.
Certainly. Thank you very much, Matt. Nitesh, over to you. How do you address the challenge of impact measurement?
Okay. Thanks, Lena. I mean, I actually agree with Matt in that in terms of supply chain, I think this is a difficult thing to measure in terms of impact on the supply chain. But what we're generally aiming for is more transparency. So transparency around what we're purchasing, making sure it's responsibly sourced, etc. So firstly, we want to work with our designers to consider circular indicators or circular solutions. For example, materials, products, and components of the built environment which are readily repurposed, reused, or recycled to enable materials to be kept in the loop for longer. So by working with our supply chain, we can effectively facilitate these relationships to offer our clients a better solution. So the proof of this will be probably in years to come, and where the performance contracts give the manufacturers and suppliers the incentives to offer better products in the first place, and that's for the longer term. And also products which can be improved over time, because as we know, technology is increasing sort of year by year. So if we're creating performance contracts for 15, 20, or even 60 years, how will that compare to actually changing that product after, say, 5 or 10? And are there these points in time where things can be upgraded or built in so that we're not dealing with obsolescence time and time again, but we're actually future-proofing these things. And I suppose another thing is, in terms of measurement, we know that approximately 50% of all waste comes from the construction industry. So the construction industry in the UK wastes about 80 to 100 million tons of material every year. So hopefully by implementing circular solutions, we can reduce this, but also more importantly, reduce our consumption of raw materials as well.
Okay. I was just thinking, because it's obviously a very difficult area, as everyone acknowledged. I wonder this is a question for everyone actually, I wonder from your perspective, when you try to develop certain KPIs and measurement programs, do you have any idea of industries or companies potentially that are actually doing a great job, and you would recommend our listeners, for example, to keep a track of their work, and this could potentially help them? So Nitesh, do you have any sort of ideal companies, guru companies that you think you can pick up from?
As Matt said, it's very difficult to compare company to company, and in the construction industry, we all have our own KPIs. So whilst we think we're doing the best, our measurements are totally different to our competitors in the UK or in Europe even. And I suppose that's why we're starting to refer to the Supply Chain Sustainability School, because they're offering a service to unite stakeholders together so that we can, pass down these obligations and KPIs to our supply chain in a consistent message, so that we're not trying to sort of say, well, my supply chain is better than your supply chain. So I think the KPI issue is slightly confusing, if you like. Essentially, all we want to do is enable everyone to be educated and upskilled to a certain level. Because when we get an enlightened client that we want to work with, or wants to work with us, at least we know that we can deliver on their aspirations.
Okay, thank you very much, Nitesh. We have a few more minutes left, and I would like to actually summarize our conversation. It's coming to an end, and I would like, therefore, to ask the panelists and the audience for a little favor. So for the speakers, based on our today's conversation and your experiences, can you please come up with the top 3 takeaways on how to enable circular economy in supply chains? And potentially for you, Bibi and Matt, to suggest companies or industries that we can pick up from and learn from. And for the audience, can you please tweet by using the hashtag SSC15 your top 3 takeaways from today's conversation, and perhaps your professional experiences or simply personal views. We'll be picking up those tweets. Again, the hashtag is SSC15. So, Bibi, shall we start with you? What are your top 3 takeaways, and what's the company or an industry to learn from?
Yeah, thanks. Just quickly looking at the time, I think first of all, no one can hide from the concept of circular economy anymore. I think missing the boat on this subject is really not future-proof, both on the side of the environment as well as for each individual company, whatever sector you may be in. For us in Fairphone, this is a very exciting and good point of departure, because we all know it's not possible to change the entire economic system and the existing infrastructures overnight. But by having these conversations and pilot together and search for common ground, things do start to move quite fast now, and we're learning extremely valuable lessons with suppliers and partners that are willing to co-invest. And at some point it becomes therefore really difficult for those that currently turn a blind eye to catch up with that. Secondly, I think an important point to make is don't be afraid also to get your hands dirty. To improve current business practices, we must all be willing to dig up and clean up some dirt as well, both inside as well as outside of our operation. And you could see it rather as an opportunity to do good and show it, rather than a risk that should be avoided or hidden. And the last point that I wanted to make is that we are really in this together, because each and every one of you and your organizations are part of the same global economic system, and each of us can create very little impact while operating in isolation. So we believe that with open discussions and strategic partnerships, there's really currently endless room to achieve mutual benefit and create a net positive value, both from an economic perspective as well as from a social and environmental perspective. Yeah, looking at time, I think we should leave it with that. If you are interested to meet us or learn more, we are end of this month in London, where we have a public event and launch Fairphone 2. So for everyone that wants to discuss opportunities, welcome to look at the website and come meet us then at the event.
Excellent. No one can hide from the concept of circular economy. Well said, Bibi. Well, Nitesh, so what's your top 3 takeaways to enable that change?
Okay, thanks, Alina. I'd say firstly, it's realizing what clients actually want, and time and time again, we're being told by clients that they want to reduce the performance gap. They want assurance that their buildings are going to perform over the long period, over the long term. And I'd suggest that actually what they want is performance rather than ownership. Secondly, I'd say supply chains need to think about their own product development to enable reuse and repurposing, because that's not really being done enough. and that's to realize both the social and commercial benefits, but also that enables them to innovate and to keep up with the market. And thirdly, the last takeaway would be to sign up to the Supply Chain Sustainability School if you want to be involved in our free supplier workshop.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Nitesh. And Matt, over to you. Top 3 takeaways for our listeners to enabling the circular economy in supply chains.
Thanks, Elena. I suppose my first piece would be keep it simple and focused, so don't try and consume the elephant all in one go. Try to articulate what the business case is. It is important. And find that lighthouse project that can act as a beacon to the rest of the organisation. And then just as an add-on to that is have faith, because my experience of these circular economy projects, you won't have thought of all the benefits. And in all the ones we've done, there are supplementary things, spin-off things that have happened that we didn't anticipate when we first started, and that just enhances the value further. So keep it simple, try to focus on the business case, find your lighthouse project and have faith.
Thank you very much, Matt. Thanks, everyone. It's been an excellent discussion, and I'm afraid the time has run out. Everyone who signed up to the webinar will receive a recording of today's webinar within next 2 weeks. If your questions were not answered, you can raise them with Matt, Nitesh, and Bibi, along with 30 other leading industry figures who will be joining us at the Sustainable Supply Chain Summit taking place on 10th and 11th November in London. You can also tweet them via hashtag SSC15. You can see the details of the summit on your screens now. And may I just thank everyone for joining us today. I hope it's been an enjoyable conversation and the discussion. I look forward to connecting with all of you sometime soon. Thank you very much. Goodbye.